The LFO section now. Alright, I'm going to start from scratch here again. So let's make some assignments. Engine 1 wavetable. Let's assign LFO1 to the wavetable position. So this time I'm going to click over here, and I'll just click and drag around the knob to make the assignment. Now remember, LFOs are bipolar, so if the knob is in the center, we can see how it's moving into the positive as well as the negative. Now there also is this option called unipolar. So unlike envelopes, with LFOs you have the option to make them unipolar or keep them as bipolar. So that's convenient. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like. I can adjust the speed of modulation here. It's set in Hertz. Or I can click here and choose any of these sync modes. Sync binary is just your normal metric divisions of your clock. And then we have sync triplets. So all the triplet options are here. So quarter triplet, eighth note triplet, so on and so forth. And then we also have the dotted versions. Interesting how these three are in separate menus. Typically in other LFOs and other synths, you might see all three combined into one. Alright, I'm going to switch back to the Hertz mode, which is kind of free running here. Alright, now let's take a look at the waveform knob. So this knob lets us select from different shapes for the LFO. And just like the wavetable position selector, we get all those in between positions between the two shapes. It does snap at certain positions, like the triangle here. So if you want it to be perfectly a triangle, kind of convenient to get to that position. And if I move further, kind of morphs into a square wave. And then lastly, it morphs into what is called sample and hold. So with sample and hold, what we get is kind of like a square wave, but it's arbitrary. So sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's in the middle. So think of it like a stepped random modulator. Alright, so aside from those four shapes, we also have the option to adjust the symmetry of the shape. So if I move this into the positive, that triangle kind of turns into a sawtooth. And if I switch it the other way, we still get a sawtooth, but for the entire phase of the LFO. So depending on which shape you choose here, you notice that the symmetry does different things. Then there's phase. So do you want the LFO to start at the zero crossing? Or do you want it to start at 90 degrees? So you have all these different options here. Fade can be helpful. So if I have a faster modulation rate, and maybe I don't want this to kick in immediately, I want it to gradually kick in. So I can introduce a bit of a fade. And if you keep an eye over here, you notice how the LFO gradually grows. Now instead of fade, you can do a smoothing. So with smoothing, we kind of further affect the shape, not so much the time. So let's say I'm going to go for a more jagged shape like the triangle here. And with smoothing, kind of curve it out like that. Let's try with the square. So that can be interesting. And then lastly, we have key tracking. So in key tracking, depending on which part of the keyboard you're playing at, so if I play lower or higher, the speed of the LFO will change. Now right now it's set to 0, so nothing's happening. So let's increase it to, let's say, 133. No change on this C, but if I play an octave lower, you notice it's slower. Go an octave above, it's faster. We can do the inverse. So no change on this C, but if I play on a higher note, it goes slower. And if I play a lower note, it goes faster. Alright, so key tracking. Next, we have this reset source. So envelopes have a gate source LFOs have a reset source. And you get a similar list here, the keyboard trigger options. We can choose other LFOs, so that can be interesting. So let's say LFO 2 is going to decide when this LFO resets. So let's go back to a normal sine wave, and I'll also slow this down. So you notice that right now the LFO is doing its thing, but somewhere over here, it just gets reset and starts over again. If I make this even faster, you notice it resets faster. So that's interesting, choosing a reset source. You can also set it to free running, so it never resets. As I'm playing different notes, the LFO just keeps doing its thing. Another very interesting option here is the Engine 1 green trigger, or Engine 2 green trigger. Let's use Engine 2 green trigger here. Now this feature specifically refers to, in the sample mode, we have the granular mode and the density parameter. So let's bring the volume down on this. So we're not going to listen to Engine 2, but we need to have it on for this feature to work. Now check out what happens when I adjust the density of the grains. So if it's low density, it triggers a bit late, but as I increase the density, it triggers faster. So that can be quite interesting, adjusting the retrigger of an LFO based on the density of the granular engine. And you don't even have to be listening to this. Alright, so that's the LFO section. Again, I've just shown you LFO 1, but LFO 2 and LFO 3 are pretty much identical. Alright, in the next tutorial, we'll check out the function generator.